So yeah, that's definitely really cool that you guys kind of just like kind of built it based off of like a issue that you discovered um, yourselves. Um, so yeah, in general, so like being a founder of Ajna, like how has the process been building the community?
We have not focused very much on community building, unfortunately. We've been really focused on building the protocol. So we're kind of trusting that once we put this out there and people start integrating it, that the community will develop itself because we have this, I think I mentioned this earlier, an on-chain grant process. So if you don't mind, I'll take like a minute to describe how that works. Uh, so
Yeah, yeah.
we've set aside, so actually let me take an even higher level here. I need to tell you about the Ajna token. So Ajna, even though there's no governance, Ajna does have a token. The reason this token is useful to people is that it allows you to buy reserves from pools. So over time, if you start a lending market, like I'll just use a random example. Let's say that you start a lending market for Bored Ape 69 versus USDC. So people come in, they lend USDC, and whoever owns Bored Ape 69 can pledge it as collateral and borrow that USDC. So over time, fees will accrue in this market. And we had to have these fees accrue. This is from a game theory perspective. If you create any opportunity for a circular lending market where there's no friction or fees introduced, you open it up to manipulation. And then we'd have to add governance and then we'd have to add oracles. So we actually needed these fees. And we had to decide, do we want the fees to get burned or do we want the fees to go somewhere? So we obviously decided they should go somewhere. We're not just going to burn money. So what happens is as pools accumulate fees, they will auction off this income and they can only accept Ajna tokens to pay for this income. And we had to do that because we also needed to run this in a decentralized way. So the way that that process works is, let's say that there's 10,000 USDC getting auctioned off from that pool. The pool will start a Dutch auction that begins at the entire supply of Ajna tokens. And it will go down, it'll have every hour until we find the right market price of Ajna and USDC. And then the Ajna tokens are sent by the user who wants to purchase the USDC to the pool, and they are irreparably burned. So that means that Ajna supply will only go down over time. There's no way for it to go up. It's in a perpetual state of buyback from the pools. So that's why the Ajna token is useful. We've sidelined 30% of this token supply into a community treasury that is distributed quarterly based on quadratic voting of the token holders. So to go through the process, we start the quarter with proposals. Anyone can make a proposal. You have 80 days to get your proposal in. By the end of the 80th day, we will take the top 10 by number of votes and pass them through to a funding round. This funding round is quadratic, meaning we encourage people to fund smaller proposals. So there's 10 proposals that make it through. You get the sum of squares of your Ajna tokens to vote on them. And then once that funding round is done, after a week or so, or 10 days, you are able to, if you won your proposal, you get Ajna tokens from the treasury.
Nice. So I'm a huge fan of the quadratic voting process. Can you explain that a little bit more for everyone?
Yes. So quadratic voting is how you encourage funding to a broader distribution of proposals. So if this was just majority vote and like you were looking to fund binary fund or not fund a proposal, then you're probably just going to get a few big ones and it doesn't really trickle down. The model that we were trying to encourage here is that every Ajna token holder should get to allocate their pro rata share of the quarterly budget. So if you own 1% of the Ajna token supply, in theory, you should be able to allocate 1% of the budget, uh, which is great in theory. But once you get to practice, you need to put all sorts of incentive mechanisms in place because otherwise people will just give themselves a dividend, right? So the quadratic voting works both ways. It makes it so that you can allocate your pro rata share of the budget. But we also introduce a negative voting where it's very low marginal cost to vote against somebody's proposal as well. But you're not going to waste votes to vote against an honest proposal. You're only going to do it if somebody's self-staking. So we think we've hit the incentives right, where A, we let everybody allocate their pro rata share of the budget, but we strongly disincentivize self-staking.